It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome, Quiller Nation. This is Earl Showerman, your guest host. Stephen has asked me to step in for an occasion, and I'm privileged and honored that he chose me. Of course, we are near neighbors, and I am in his studio. But for today's episode, I have secured Cheryl Eagan-Donovan, the founder of Controversy Films, a notable writer, director, producer, publicist of numerous independent film projects. Cheryl's background, educational background, including having studied Shakespeare and poetry at Goddard College. She received an MFA in creative writing at Lesley University in Cambridge, Mass., where she now teaches Shakespeare, dramatic poetry, screenwriting, and the authorship challenge. She's also affiliated with the Boston Grub Club Street Center for Creative Arts and has had other positions in the past, and including getting an MBA and being, for some time, a band manager. But she was introduced to the authorship question by Harvard instructor Don Ostrowski many years ago. He later published his own authorship doubts in the 2020 edition of his book, Who Wrote That? Authorship Controversies from Moses to Sholokov. He encouraged Cheryl to look further regarding the authorship question. She read J. Thomas Loney's Shakespeare Identified and Joseph Sobrand's Alias Shakespeare, and thus began her deep dive, decades-long exploration of our favorite subject. Cheryl and I met in 2005 at the very first Ashland Shakespeare Authorship Conference, where she secured the rights to Margot Anderson's recently published Shakespeare Shakespeare by Another Name, returning in 2010, so 5 years later, with a camera crew and conducting a series of interviews, including Michael Cecil, the Marquess of Exeter, Lord Burleigh, John Shahan, numerous other Oxfordian notables, and thus she was launched. Over the next decade, she personally raised the funds for Nothing is Truer Than Truth, which is the name of her video. It premiered on Hulu in 2018 and is still available on various streaming services. I came up with I was present in the 2018 Oakland Conference of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, in which floor donations completed the funding for completing that project. In 2019, Cheryl was awarded the Oxfordian of the Year in recognition of her masterful, tenacious pursuit of a project now having been released in Great Britain in 2022 and viewed by many, many thousands of people. This is the way we build an Oxfordian community, and Cheryl is our master technician at doing this. Presently, Cheryl is working on another film project and in the final editing stages of assembling parts of her latest authorship film, which we'll be talking about today. The title of that film is All the World's a Stage. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Earl. I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you about my new film project, All the World's a Stage. This project began when Nothing is Truer Than Truth premiered on Sky Arts TV in the UK under the new title, Shakespeare, the Man Behind the Name. And Sir Derek Jacobi and his partner, the actor and director Richard Clifford, were so happy that it was finally released in England and their friends could see it on TV that they said, "Oh, you must make another film." And I thought, oh my goodness. The last one, as you said, had taken me 10 years to complete, but I was so very grateful for their support. They said, we'll help you. And Richard said, this time you have to go to Stratford and explain why it couldn't have been the man from Stratford. So I had resisted that on my previous project. I just wanted to tell the story of Edward de Vere. Here he is, take him or leave him. He's a fascinating life. But I had never been to Stratford, so I took up the challenge. And I had been doing research into Oxford's literary circle. I was inspired by Alexander Waugh's research into Oxford's time at the end of the 16th century when he was really at the center of the theater world. And I thought, well, I've been doing research on this topic, and there's evidence that Edward de Vere really was at the center of the theater world. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry about that. Um, and um, that completely threw me off. Let me think. So basically, it occurred to me that we often say about Shakespeare, he was a man of the theater. Well, what does that mean? And so I really wanted to tell the story of Edward de Vere as the center of the theatrical world in late 16th century London and trace his career as a theater maker and a playwright from its beginnings at Headingham, through his exposure to plays at Cambridge and Oxford universities. So we went there to film. To his role as Master of the Revels at Blackfriars, and to the opening of the first public theaters in Shoreditch, right near Fisher's Folly, the Curtain and the theater. And so we tell kind of the parallel stories in this film of Oxford's career and his journey to becoming the man who invented the golden age of theater in Elizabethan England, and the history of that development of theater as well. So kind of how those two things intersect. And
well, that's a natural segue from your first film, Nothing is Truer Than Truth, which really focuses on Oxford's adventures in Italy, where you did much filming and interviewed Italian scholars and made a big imprint on us in understanding the importance of that part of his life when he was in his early 20s, mid-20s, and traveling through France and Germany and spent better part of a year in Italy. So I think what you're picking up, obviously, is at the very next step of his career when he's back in London and the revolution in the theater world, in which over the next 25 years, 8 major public theaters would be built in London. And it was, a huge new industry that was created. And his pen was obviously behind a lot of that action. So wonderful idea to continue, and such a great idea that Sir Derek Jacobi and Richard Clifford, who's president of the De Vere Society, chairman of the De Vere Society, are supporting you in this project. And I know that you've been doing quite a bit of filming in England. I was privileged to be with Kevin Gilvary during a time when you were actually filming out at Oxford. And I saw how you operate, and I am amazed by how strong and independent and fearless you are in taking on this new project, and how fruitful it will be because of the revelatory nature of what few of us understand was going on at the time in England in terms of the importance of the theater culture in creating an English identity.
Right. Yes, it did seem, as you said, quite natural because my last film, Nothing is Truer Than Truth, ended with De Vere coming back from Italy, and the first productions that we know of at the palaces at Whitehall and at Hampton Court of the plays that were the inspirations, predecessors for Comedy of Errors and Two Gentlemen of Verona. It was, the first one was called The History of Error, and the other was called The History of Titus and Giuseppus. So it makes, as you said, a nice segue to the next story. But I think, as someone who teaches screenwriting and has done, a lot of consulting, working with other directors and writers around developing their scripts, that one thing you always want to do in a film is show people something that they've never seen before, or something they think they know from a different point of view. So where we focused on Italy in the previous film, in this one, it's about the theater. And as I said, I'm not aware of any other films that address that specific aspect of who Edward de Vere was and who Shakespeare is. So, and for me, that's a big part of the project too, is the power of theater. I really do believe in that, the power of live theater, particularly today with everything that's happening in the world. Not only do we really need to look to Shakespeare's humanism, the way that it's expressed in the plays, but we also need to celebrate theater for its power to connect us, to build empathy between people. So part of the process of making this film, as well as documenting De Vere's career and the history of theater in England, has been to interview directors and talk with them about what it is that makes theater so important in our world today, and how Shakespeare's works reflect that. So
That's,
it's been really fun.
well, you bring De Vere back in 1576. And between then and all through the 1580s, you literally have a literary ferment going on, with Oxford basically at the center of a number of other writers of that time, John Lilly, Anthony Munday, and Robert Greene, all dedicating works to him in the mid 1580s, while at the same time they're writing plays for the court stage and for the outdoor theaters as well. And so you see him diving in right away. And I really have thought that focusing on the 1580s and the early 90s would be very, very fruitful for Oxfordians, because, of course, during that time, he had several acting companies. He had Oxford's Boys and Oxford's Men. We knew that Oxford's Boys did a production of the history of Agamemnon and Ulysses, which was probably a first version of Troilus and Cressida in 1584. And we have evidence that he and Lilly were, working together for a number of Lilly's court very well-written performances. In fact, the music for Lilly's plays may have been attributed to Oxford as well. So his close collaboration with the major writers, playwrights, including Marlowe, of that period, really puts him in a unique position. And I think what you're doing is actually making sense for the general public of what was really going on in a revolutionary sense in terms of the theater culture and how it impacted the identity and the sense of connection within the theater community. I know that when I go to the theater and we have an emotional reaction, we have a catharsis at the end because of a great tragedy or even a marvelous comedy or a musical. I just saw Come From Afar at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and when the crowd rose and was shouting "Bravo, bravo," you just felt the chill of what it's like to have an authentic, really a near religious experience, because you've seen something in which humanity comes together to redeem itself. And it's such a beautiful opportunity. And to have that as a shared audience and a live audience is wonderful. But what you're doing in revealing the evolution of this through what your project promises, I find quite fascinating and quite compelling. And I'm so happy you're on it. Many of us, of course, became interested in the authorship question because of videos we saw. That was certainly true with Al Austin's, the mysterious William Shakespeare that was on PBS back in the 1980s, and since then by several other filmmakers, including yourself. But I really think that the video world and the film world is the best way for us to spread the word that we have significant questions about the true attribution of these marvelous works.
Yes, I agree. When you were talking about the early versions of the plays too, I couldn't help thinking about when we were in Oxford, and standing outside Christ Church Cathedral and talking about Palamon and our site, which, we know what happened there because of the fact that the Queen was there and the stage collapsed. And so we have a record of this. And it's really interesting to think about the fact that, not only was Oxford there, but he may have been involved in writing that along with Richard Edwards, who it's attributed to. So, looking at the very early stages of his development as a playwright has been really fascinating, and being able to film at these great locations, Oxford and Cambridge University, at Kenilworth, where Leicester had put on a big production, at the Middle Temple and at Gray's Inn, that's been really terrific to tell the story again visually, to have access to these great houses. And, the other thing I wanted to mention was that another part of the story, I think, is his process as a playwright. And so we really get into, as you know, the way that he used not only his life experience, which was a lot of what we talked about in Nothing is Truer Than Truth and his trip to Italy and Margot Anderson's book, which really beautifully outlines the parallels between his own life experience and the plays. But here, his sources. So because you are an expert on the Greek sources of the plays,
Yes.
and then, having access to Audley End, where Roger Strittmatter has done his groundbreaking research on the 3 new books that he's discovered with extensive annotations by Edward de Vere. That's something that I'm absolutely thrilled about because, again, this is something that no one's seen before. It's always a challenge to make this material accessible for the general audience. And for that, I'm very grateful to my editor, young woman in Los Angeles, Emily Wagner, terrific editor. She works for Netflix. She's brilliant. But there's, this is a story, as I said, that people are not aware of that's so important. I'm really grateful to you and to Roger, Roger particularly for giving me an exclusive on this story of what he's discovered at Audley End, because I do think it is going to really change the way we think about who Shakespeare was and, his process for writing the play. So that was a great thrill to be able to go there and film. We filmed Derek and Richard at the house, and to have Roger, one of the things we filmed most recently, again, that I'm really proud of was Roger at the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., looking at the copy of the Geneva Bible that was on display there for a year. So, to get that access to be able to film there was a big coup, I think. For me, I was thrilled. And it was wonderful for Roger to be there because the library's been completely renovated, so we have some beautiful footage of him looking at the copies of the folios and talking about, the Folger and his research that has led up to this moment, So I think the intersection of all those different stories, your research on the Greek sources, Roger's research on the books that Oxford had access to, and then our ability to, like I said, kind of trace his career at the different locations in England, gives us something that's visually compelling, I hope, kind of want to take the viewer on a journey. And again, I'm, very, very grateful to the entire team, to Richard and Derek for their support, to you and Roger and everyone who's participated on screen in the film, given their time and their expertise, and the many, many supporters from the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, from the De Vere Society, and so many friends and colleagues who have become a part of the team, literally. They're part of the big team that's making this project possible, so that's been really satisfying for me, and can't say enough about how much I've enjoyed that part of the process.
Well, you're learning about something at the same time that you're creating a teaching tool for those of us that need a deeper understanding. And one of the areas that provoked me, and you're well aware of it, is that I was very interested in Shakespeare's use of untranslated Greek sources, since he grew up in the greatest literary household in England at the time. The Cecils, both Mildred and William, had massive collections of books, thousands of them, and many primary Greek editions or Greek Latin translations. And Mildred Cecil was well known as a Greek translator and a poet. And so he was surrounded by these people. And in his teens, he was still under the care of Arthur Golding, who was actively translating the Metamorphoses while they were both in residence at Cecil House. So you just can imagine the scene in the library where the uncle and the brilliant nephew, who he honors with a dedication of his History of Trogus Pompeius, when Oxford was 14 years old. So he was a prodigal literary, and the dedications to him during that time and really up through the age of early 20s really emphasized the fact that he was a student of history, a student of poetry, and that at the age of 19 that he acquired a copy of Plutarch's Lives, and that was critical to the history plays. And he also acquired a copy of Plato in Dialogue. So I know that he was familiar with deep Greek philosophy from a very, very early age and was familiar with the classical languages, was being taught that. When he traveled in Italy, one of his companions was a Greek tutor. He attended the Greek church in Italy. So when he was in Venice. And so I focused on that since I knew that most scholars did not accept that Greek drama affected Shakespeare. And it's my very good fortune to have heard a lecture over 20 years ago at a conference in Concordia in which undergraduate Andy Worth opened that door for me. And when I retired 2 years later, that was immediately the thing that interested me, particularly Hamlet and the Oresteia of Aeschylus, which also profoundly affected Shakespeare's writing of Macbeth. Both those papers are published in the book that I eventually put together last year, Shakespeare's Greater Greek, which was a great pleasure because it was to follow a thread of gold, acknowledging Oxford or Shakespeare's awareness of these untranslated or very relatively unavailable Greek play editions by Euripides, Sophocles, Aeschylus, and even Aristophanes, who I think had some influence on A Midsummer Night's Dream and the magic and transformation and that went on during that time. So it was a stroke of luck that I was at the right place, the right time to hear the right lecture and had the right freedom in the right library to go to. So by serendipity, Cheryl, we've all been blessed by this, and to have this now coordinated in some regard with Roger's research in using Greek editions of the Roman plays in an untranslated edition with annotations in the columns in both Latin and Greek in Oxford's handwriting. Now, I mean, this is far more a smoking gun in some regards, if that can be confirmed, which the first, journal publishing on this in forensic handwriting confirmed that the handwriting could possibly have been that of the Earl of Oxford. So over the next years, as Roger continues his research, he will discover things about those volumes and about the handwriting analysis that will confirm this. And really, for those who are following this argument, I think that is a profound new revelation. He certainly has found passages with annotations that highlight passages that end up in Antony and Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. So these Greek editions at Audley End, which is in Essex, not very far from where the Earl of Oxford's properties and where he grew up, exist. How they came to be in the library, the provenance is a little bit uncertain. Henry Neville may have been responsible for collecting these books. We have some annotations that could be attributed to Henry Neville. And it was really the Nevillian researchers who kind of opened up this door in which Jan Scheffer was paying attention and suggested to Roger he might go on and look at these editions. And there are 3 volumes there that have annotations that seem to be in the very handwriting of the Earl of Oxford, which Roger obviously is the world expert for the better part of the last 20 years.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm really, really happy that we are able to incorporate that in the film because it will reach a much wider audience than we do, say, at our conferences, which are wonderful too. But this is so exciting. And, I used your book, Shakespeare's Greater Greek, in one of my courses at Lesley University. It was a course on tragedy called Seriously Tragic. And the students absolutely loved it because we read the plays, together. We read Hamlet, we read the Oresteia, we read the, works of Shakespeare and the works of the Greek side by side, and they were just blown away. They couldn't believe the parallels, again, that they had never been exposed to before. So that was a wonderful experience. The other thing is, as you said, my own research into these sources, has been wonderful because I've been able to go to Cambridge University and see Mildred Cecil's Greek Bible and see William Cecil's books and see Thomas Smith's books, so I was able to get permission to do research at the, Queen's College old library where these books still exist. And it's just been amazing, to be able to see the documents firsthand and understand, again, as I said, what his process was. And one of the things that I love is the concept of the theater of memory, or the memory theater, which again fits this film so well. So we talk about that a little bit about in the film, as well as a way to organize all this information that the writer of Shakespeare would have to have had. De Vere is annotating these books and then making notes about how he will use that material in the plays, Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra. And how did he keep track of all of this? Well, we think he probably had a photographic memory, but there's also this system that was developed by an Italian writer, the book that was published in Florence in 1550. So De Vere likely would have been aware of this system of memorization, and the Italian writer himself, probably the book itself, so it's a wonderful analogy to the whole film, which is about the power of theater. How did he do it, right? That's one of the questions. How did Shakespeare accomplish so much? And part of it is too having this wonderful group of writers who were in his stable, that he had his school at the Savoy Hospital, and then he had his group of writers working with him at Fisher's Folly, so we know that he was supporting these writers. Those are some of the other manuscripts that I've looked at. Again, with Alexander Waugh's help, I was able to see, the letters from Churchyard and the landlord, complaining about how she hadn't been paid. And so we know that by the end of the beginning of the 1590s, he was broke, and Alexander Waugh had wrote a great article about that, 1591, A Watershed Year, where he says, by this time, Edward de Vere has literally lost all his money. He lost a lot before when he was traveling in Italy. He lost a lot when his father died and the Queen took over, all of his lands. But his support for theater, his financial contribution to that golden age of theater, was maybe the last straw, And so that's kind of where the story ends, because in 1593, the name William Shakespeare appears for the first time, Shakespeare, and then on the two long poems, as you know, and then really the whole theater world kind of shifts to a new group of people, the businessmen, Henslow, Allen, and Burbage. And things then kind of move across the river. The theater is dismantled and the Globe is erected across the theater, and there's the Rose and the Fortune and these other theaters, and a new group of people kind of take over the theater world, business guys and impresarios. And De Vere, we believe, retired to Hackney and began revising the plays. And so that's the story arc in this film. And I think it's again something that people will be interested in learning more about, I hope. But we had the opportunity to film at Hackney, and I did some research there at the Hackney Library regarding the tomb that was there originally. I saw the sketches of that, so that was really fascinating. So it's just been, for me, as I said, a great experience getting to visit these sites and doing some more research. And
I don't think anyone has done more work in this regard than you, Cheryl, in the last decades I've known you. You've just been back and forth across the Atlantic. You've been to South by Southwest down in Texas. You've, attended literary conferences in foreign countries as part of this project, in which you go sometimes under a concealed identity of somebody who's not necessarily a Shakespeare authorship doubter, but somebody who's interested in filmmaking. And, you've infiltrated in a variety of communities. And now the general public will stand to learn something about the creation of theater. I think the idea that a man of Oxford's literary talents could be reinventing realistic theater 2,000 years after it perished at the end of the Peloponnesian War and the collapse of the golden age of Athens. And so there was an excitement of a revolutionary process going on during that time that I think the general public, and certainly the Shakespeare-loving public will pay attention to, because it has to do with the creation of genius. I mean, when people talk about Shakespeare's knowledge of all these various fields of knowledge, including medicine, law, etc., that they say, well, he was a genius. He just hung out at the bookstores and down St. Paul's and learned in the Mermaid Tavern of Universal Knowledge from sailors and travelers from around the world. How do you know about the Italian specifics? And it is oftentimes the topical allusions within Shakespeare that point more and more toward an author who was deeply connected and with Oxford at the center of consideration. I mean, just think of the role that Polonius plays in Hamlet and the likelihood that Polonius was based on the Earl of Oxford's father-in-law, William Cecil, and that it did not get published until after Cecil's death. So that was, and then you see the two versions of Hamlet, the first quarto, which comes out in 1603, and then the second quarto in 1604, which is almost twice as long, and usually the one that scholars go to see as the most definitive of the poet's real intentions to create the story. But the dramatic difference in the evolution of that text alone is remarkable. I mean, such people referring to a Hamlet production in 1589 invent the idea of an Hamlet, and yet there's references to Hamlet's productions at various venues in London in the 1590s, 96. Gabrielle Harvey writes about this, and other people have seen productions, and there's other literary references to early Hamlet, which challenges authority and, of course, challenges the assumptions that the current popular film Hamnet makes. And for quillers out there who are not aware of the fact, Hamnet and Judith Shakespeare was named for their neighbors, Hamnet and Judith Sadler, who were friends of the Shakespeares. And the idea that Hamnet and Hamlet mean the same thing, as it says at the beginning of that film, that is so popular these days, is a complete fabrication. And so I just wanted to throw out the fact that you, Quiller Nation, know much better about the creation of Hamlet than the filmmakers, using their imagination and wonderful acting and filmmaking talents, create a beautiful visually, fiction, much like Shakespeare in Love, much like Shakespeare in Love. So no wonder there's a hunger for this. People want to know how these great works of arts were created, and you're going to give them a map that is unprecedented in terms of the general public's understanding of the evolution of modern theater that's going on during a ferment in the 1580s and early 90s, as you say.
Well, I hope so, because again, I mean, Chloe Zhao is a great director, and I'm very happy for Jessie Buckley to be the first Irish woman to win Best Actress Oscar. And as you said, people are hungry for stories. Stories are a great way, for us all to connect and to understand the world. But what's interesting to me is that there are several references in the film to things that we know are true about Oxford or his wife, Aunt Cecil. So, for example, when I saw an early preview from Focus Features with the film group that I belong to here in Boston. And, first of all, they have Will Shakespeare, the man from Stratford, teaching Latin, but then they have his children reading Greek at the kitchen table, and they have his wife, being someone who's a healer and understands medicine and her herbs, and I just was like, wait a minute, that's Aunt Cecil, that's not Agnes.
Yes.
From
Yes.
from Shakespeare. But the same thing is happening, with the theater. Everybody's aware that theater started, in Shoreditch at the Curtain and the Public Theater, at the Curtain and the Theater, and not at the Globe. And so they're building a new museum of Shakespeare at the site of the Curtain Theater, and they are also they're writing books. There are new books coming out all the time about how, yes, Shakespeare went from Stratford upon Avon to the Shoreditch neighborhood, and that's how he became the writer Shakespeare. And so there's an awareness that that's important to the story. But like with the dating of the plays, what they're doing is retrofitting the Stratford guy's life to what we know about where theater was happening and, what the history of theater in England was. So it's really interesting to me, that there's still an alternative narrative being constructed. But when you were talking about the research that I've been doing, the other thing I did want to mention and my going to different conferences and stuff is that I am going to be speaking at the World Shakespeare Congress, which is the traditional Stratfordian conference in Verona this July about Greensleeves. So I had originally submitted my paper on Shakespeare music to this group that I'm involved with, the Royal Music Association's Shakespeare Music Group. And as you noted, they are not interested in authorship material, but the song Greensleeves is a really fascinating work that appears in one of the plays. And I decided to pursue that further. I've been, working with Michael Delahoyte a little bit on his knowledge of that song and its structure. But when I was in Washington, D.C. last week, screening a little preview for people in that area who have helped support the film, I went first to the Folger Library as a reader, and I got permission from Heather Wolf, who's in charge of research at the Folger, to view the original John Dowland manuscript because it's considered very rare and you can't just walk in off the street and say, I want to see that manuscript. So that was great. I got to see that version and I'm really excited about talking about that in Verona. And when I go to London next week, I'm going to the DVS meeting on April 18th. So when I'm in London next week on Friday, before that, I'll go up to Cambridge again and see another manuscript copy of Greensleeves. So for me, as you said, it's really exciting to be continuing to learn more about Shakespeare and bring that to new audiences. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
Well,
but I want to go back to the film. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me just complete that music connection process because Quillers probably generally are aware of the fact that the Earl of Oxford was acknowledged as a great musician and that the works are filled with not only songs, but musical metaphors. And he lived in a household where music was obviously being played and where he was learning it. So I am really excited about the whole story of Greensleeves, which is such a heartful tune, and connected to that era. And congratulations on your invitation to speak at the World Congress, where you will meet with many people that are curious, not just about Shakespeare's music, but something else that you might be able to spread. How wonderful that our agent is going to be at the podium. I just love that idea, Cheryl. Congratulations. And again, this is fulfillment of a pursuit that started 25, 30 years ago for you and has been non-stop on top of what really is a pretty busy life that you've had as a teacher and, producer. So I'm very happy for your success in this regard and really for the emphasis on the creation of the theater culture as the quintessential contribution that England had made to the world during that time. It was just a very exciting moment and the birth of the English language in a way in which Shakespeare, of course, invented thousands of words and new usages that still are very, very popular and used almost every day in our conversations. So this is striking at the heart of the evolution of human literary achievement and understanding. And I love that you're so actively involved and still pursuing this with the kind of fervor that is required. It's really a religious experience in some regards. And when you hear that music and it touches your heart and you feel the tears well up a little bit, it's the authentic thing. So congratulations, Cheryl, on all these projects you've been working on and the filming and going back again to Europe as an agent of a new paradigm.
Thank you.
We're really living in an important age, my friends, in which Shakespeare is about to explode. I mean, if you pay attention to what's been researched in recent years, especially Roger Strittmatter's work, you will realize that the creation of the works required a person who was extremely well read. And Cheryl, you've seen what these folio editions are like. I mean, they cost a fortune to buy them, and of course, Shakespeare of Stratford had no books in his will that we have. Right. So we know he did not have a literary life, but in the Earl of Oxford's case, you see all these 20-some volumes dedicated to him. And, his own reputation spread by Francis Mears and others that at court, he was the acknowledged great playwright and poet. And so he's been avoided by the Academy for a long time because of his ill reputation, having abandoned his wife when she was having had their first child, and then reworking the relationship, 5 years later after a period of estrangement, which is the subject of the article I just wrote in the De Vere Society newsletter on All's Well That Ends Well, as an elaborate memorial apologia to Mildred Cecil, and especially to Anne Cecil, who was a medical empiric, a poet, and a woman of great substance. And I think that coming to understand the role that Anne played in the creation of these works would be something worth pursuing too. So it's an endless, wonderfully open mystery that we get to pursue, Cheryl. And congratulations on being right there at the cutting edge.
Thank you, Earl. Yeah, I really enjoyed your article and your presentation at the conference in New Haven. It was wonderful. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's next. So we, as I said, when to go back to the beginning, when Derek and Richard said, you must make another film. And I thought, well, I don't want to spend another 10 years. So I said, well, if I can do it in 2 years, that's my goal. And so we did. We shot for 2 years. And then we began editing in December. And we actually finished the first cut of the film last month in March, which was amazing. And as I said, we're also composing the original music as we go. So that's been wonderful. I love working with the composer and the editor together. We're a great team. We meet every Friday. We're meeting again tomorrow. So what's next at this point is to get to lock picture. So we are cutting down at this point to feature length. So we've got a little bit of editing left to do, but once we lock picture, and our goal for that is the end of this month, the end of April, then we will begin the online edit process, which includes the color correction, audio mix, graphics, and few rights clearances this time, not as extensive as last film where I used film clips. So yes. I'm grateful for that. But, little things like that we need to do in order to produce the final version of the film so that we can begin submitting to festivals in May, which it's amazing. Like I said, this has been a much more streamlined process than the previous one. And then, of course, meetings with distributors, which, that's part of my going to different festivals as well. So that's what's next. And we really just need, a little more funding to finish that process. And so I'm, like I said, kind of meeting with donors and working toward this final version of the film. Very excited about bringing it to the public. And, as I said, so grateful to everyone who's supported the process all along. And again, the people who have given their time to participate and appear in the film. It's just been really rewarding, and really excited about submitting to festivals. One of the first ones with the May deadline that we plan to submit to is the BFI British Film Institute Festival. So that's exciting.
Well, Cheryl,
yes.
Let me just stop you for one thing. One point more. That is fundraising. You haven't mentioned that yet, but if the Quillers in our broadcast really want to help make a contribution that will complete a process by which a new masterful production that promotes the whole idea of Shakespeare being the Earl of Oxford, do a donation to Controversy Films. And Cheryl, what is the website address exactly that they should send their donations to? Because this is an opportunity to really strike when the iron is hot. And I can't tell you how amazing it is that Cheryl's worked this through because of the deep connections that it took you the decades to build, making Nothing is Truer Than Truth. Now, with All the World's a Stage, you did this thing in record time, and I look forward so much to seeing some of the early screenings of it. And the idea that there's going to be original music in it is just going to make everybody very, very so happy. So congratulations all the way around.
Earl.
But to give the web address for contributions.
Sure. Thanks so much. Yes, it's www.controversyfilms.com. And on that page, you'll find the link to go directly to our fiscal sponsor, which is the Gotham, New York. And it's 100% tax deductible. The Gotham's been around for 25 years. They've supported lots and lots of really terrific independent films. So it would be a great way to join the team. We would love to have more people on board. Very excited, like I said, about getting this film out into the world. But again, it's www.controversyfilms.com.
Very
we'd
good.
love to have you join us.
My brother-in-law, who's not a great theater specialist, but when he saw what you were doing and looked at what you have already posted on the website, some of the interviews you have with Derek and Richard Clifford, and scenes, the preview is really worth watching. It'll stimulate you guys to want to make a contribution. But Gary's very proud of having been a contributor to your film, and it's been my privilege to be somewhat helpful too. And certainly the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship and the members have been completely behind you because they trust your integrity, they trust your artistic vision, they trust that when you do an interview, you will come away with the highlights that really point out the importances. And so our time is extremely well spent involved in seeing what you produce in the end, because you've been there for a very long time and have a deep grasp of what the critical issues are. And we're talking about the period of time, in which, the power of theater as a humanist invention is being created, and we have our fingers on the pulse of that because of our identification of the Earl of Oxford as Shakespeare. And you, more than anyone, have done such great work to spread the word of those of us who spend more of our time in libraries than in traveling to do interviews and arrange for special film, editing. So all the way around, Cheryl, you are our all-star hitter.
Thank you, Earl. No, it's not a film is a collaborative medium, and I could not have done it without the support of everyone else, the scholars, the people who are my interview subjects, all of my supporters, everyone who's encouraged me and made some kind of contribution to the project. It really, really is, that's what it's about, and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you again for inviting me to speak with you, and looking forward to screening the film, very soon, having it playing at some festivals, and then available for everyone to see online eventually. So
Cheryl
really
traveled with her first film release in 2018, so a little over a decade ago. She came to Ashland, and we had a screening of her film at the university at one of their film studios, and there were about 100 people that came out to see that film. And some years later, I was at the Ford dealer, and somebody asked me if I could give him a ride home. And he saw that I was reading a Shakespeare authorship book. It was Catherine Children's book. And he said, I don't think Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I saw a couple films down there at on campus in recent years. And it convinced me that there was, and he himself was an aspiring retired engineer, potential playwright, who was a very, very smart fellow and paid attention to what the film projects produce. And so he was telling me that Shakespeare probably didn't write the works of Shakespeare. So it was a delightful conveyance, knowing that in my own community, people have been polluted by our ideas. And of course, Ashland's such a hotbed. It's a great place. And we've had 4 of our conferences, authorship conferences there. And a couple summers, we had summer seminars. And Stephen Sabo actually was very much involved in setting up a summer seminar in 2019. And we made front page of the Ashland Daily Tidings. Unfortunately, that newspaper no longer exists. But in certain communities where the penetration is deep, there will be a readership for books that are being published on this subject, but also for friends sharing Cheryl's vision by showing her film to others. It is available as a DVD. And I do recommend that. It was available on Hulu streaming recently. I think it's still available on Amazon Prime. Yes.
It is on Amazon and Apple TV, and then on several other free streamers with ads. But yes, that's been really satisfying that this film is still available and is still being viewed by people around the world. So
do you have an accounting in terms of the numbers of people that might have seen the film, Cheryl? I have no idea.
I get reports from my distributor quarterly, so I mean, I can say that it's literally thousands of people, and to put an exact number on it, I'd have to look at my last report. But that to me is the most important thing, that it's still being viewed, 10 years later, as you said, by so many people. And I couldn't give you the exact number, but it is substantial. So,
you never know who's going to get provoked into action and start coming to conferences and read and then maybe write books like me. There are people who love theater and then are opened by a whole new paradigm to consideration of the authorship, which involves deep reading. You have to go read the Greek tragedies and comedies to see maybe he too had some. And then you get behind the author's mask a little bit if you deep dive enough, So everybody has their own patterns, but every now and then, a person like yourself or me or others who have joined the organizations and done the reading and realized that there's a credible story here, and we have actually the best story of a man who went through some financial collapse, semi-ruined marriage, a reputation that was very questionable, but who was behind a literary revolution that was going on all around him, and he was the star, and anonymously so, which would be in incorporation with the principles espoused by Castiglione, one of Shakespeare's real heroes, which is the concept of sprezzatura, the aristocratic, distancing from any credit for things that they've created, and thus the reluctance to publish. Philip Sidney never wanted his poetry published. He wanted to be, circulated among the literati and copied, and that's how a lot of the works were written. But you consider how little we really have from that era. It's quite remarkable. But I think what you're doing and focusing on some of the things that were going on in the 1580s, both politically and artistically, it's going to be revelatory to audiences. And I do hope that the independent film societies invite you repeatedly to foment such wonderful new ideas and thinking about the creation of what we still consider to be the greatest works of the dramatic art in the English-speaking world. So this is a great privilege to have your friendship and your support for my own work, let alone the work of others who are in the process of creating a second round of living. It's like what you could do in retirement that is completely independent, and now you're really free to go and make your own story worthy of conveying. And at every point of your filmmaking career, Cheryl, you make a point of conveying important points, and I'm so proud. I think your impact will be every bit as great as Charlton Ogburn's and Margot Anderson's and Hank Whittemore's and the other champions that we have had leading the way in terms of the way they digest and then return with a new style of message, whether it be in film and video or in print. New ideas can stimulate, and people who are interested in theater are the people who are alive in our population. They are seekers after something, and when you go to the theater and you sit down, you realize you're a seeker, and what you're seeking is the catharsis or the revelation that will come through this message. And so this is as important as any other work that's being done in our community, Cheryl. So really appreciate it. please, everybody, make a contribution to Cheryl's new project, All the World's a Stage, and be sure to find out where it's screening. We'll probably be seeing it, I hope, at the September conference of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship in Seattle. You should all consider coming there too, because we'll have a series of great talks, I'm sure. The actor Saul Rubinek apparently has agreed to come, and he's talking about his one-man show on Shylock. So there'll be something experiential from a theatrical standpoint, as well as literary and other contributions. But Cheryl, I want that film screened at our conference in Seattle. Please bring it.
I'm sure we can make arrangements, Earl. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And thank you for the kind words. Really, I'm not sure if I can live up to all that praise, but, for me as an artist, that's what I was really interested in. I think Edward de Vere is the epitome of what we think of as an artist, brilliant in expressing himself verbally and in writing, but kind of a disaster in the rest of his life. And that's what intrigued me originally, So he's human. And as the great writers like Harold Bloom have said, Shakespeare is all about the invention of the human. So that human connection and the great humanist values that Shakespeare has given us, that's really the thing I think that is key to understanding who Shakespeare was. So thank you again.
He's the moral authority when it comes to these questions that are being raised in our culture these days. And so he is endlessly available to teaching us. And Cheryl, thank you so much for the time this morning. For this interview. It's been a great pleasure to be your host and to help you in conveying what you and others, your other filmmaker colleagues have all been so helpful, and we're very, very grateful. And of course, there are these streaming videos. Nothing is truer than truth. Last Will and Testament, the creation of the Wilson sisters, is also a beautiful film to see. That's still available on streaming. That was supported by Roland Emmerich in relation with his film Anonymous. So we have some very talented filmmakers. So Cheryl, you're certainly leading the pack, and we can hardly wait for the next production of coming out of your canister.
Thank you, Earl, and thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Quillers, for listening in. And this will be the end of my first interview hosting as Stephen, who is a great hero in his own rights, has done many fine things supporting the Shakespeare authorship on his own. So we do see that the individual who gets fired up by this can really carry a bright torch for us all. So listen in and listen on, and thank you, Quiller Nation. I'm done, Stephen. Should I push the stop button?
I think you were supposed to say, keep asking questions.
Oh, gosh. All right. Let's go back. Jake, will you cut this in? And Quillers, don't forget, keep asking questions.
Thank you, Earl. That was great.
Oh, well, I had so much fun. And we really hit all the points that I thought were pretty important, and we did it probably in just about an hour. I don't have an exact time. It's 10:08 now, and I think we started just a little bit after 9. So perhaps under an hour, but we really did cover a lot. And I got to watch that video that you did about 6 months ago, and you were talking about your background as a band manager, and I was like, oh my gosh, that woman and an MBA, you worked in corporate America for years. I'm thinking, what a revolution for you to have jumped right into this thing and become a really such a varied and interesting career. So Cheryl, you're as interesting as the damn author himself, Well, and the way you have been welcomed by Derek and Richard and warmly encouraged and supported, they were with you at Audley End, and I love to see those clips, and I thought, that's it. Well, when I was there in 2023 is when we awarded Alexander the award. I think it was.
Yes, that was a wonderful moment.
That was a wonderful time. And, well, we went to the Shakespeare pub afterwards, and you were sitting with Sir Derek, and I pushed you aside so I could get a picture of me and Sir Derek to send to my to my granddaughter. And then I walked over and I interrupted Mark Rylance's conversation with Rosa Barber and said, "Excuse me, my daughter wants a picture of me with you, Sir Mark." So I said, what privilege I have, I can walk around this joint. And who would have ever thought that I would be in this position when I retired from medicine 20 years ago, but here we are, so it's kept me alive, Cheryl, believe me, this past.
Well, it's wonderful. That's the whole thing. I mean, you bring so much to it, Earl. That's your personality. I mean, it's just wonderful. You're so curious and so supportive of everyone else. You know what I mean? It's just wonderful to have someone like you in the movement. So generous, like I said, and so open and welcoming to everyone. Because as you said, a lot of times we get separated, over small differences of opinion, which doesn't help us advance the cause.
Oh, well, you could touch the PT theory, so I didn't want to bring that one up because I know Stephen's well disposed toward Hank's thinking on this, and so that. But
it isn't just that. It's like you said. It's like going to the Shakespeare thing in Verona. Like like why not? Because as you said, I'm going to meet other people who are brilliant, studying other aspects of the work. Like that's a win-win for me.
No,
so
that's absolutely.
I try to stay open, right? Try to stay open to new ideas, no matter where they come from.
You walk into a room, you never know what connections you're going to make. I mean, I remember with the first Concordia conference I came to is because I was curious, and my ex-wife Rosie was really interested in Shakespeare, but she wouldn't go. So I said, "Well, I'm going to go." So I ended up going, and it was just an amazing experience. And I've met Roger Parisius, who is a contributor to some of Gary Goldstein's articles in the Elizabethan Review. Wrote a very powerful anti-PT article on Shakespeare's, the idea that Percy Allen and others were putting forward. So it was a privilege to jump right in and start realizing I'm surrounded by people who are actually, and there was Laura and Lisa Wilson madly scribing and collecting data and interviews, and I thought this is really the place where the revolution can occur. And I feel the same way about environmental medicine. I've been involved in a local environmental board for a number of years, and we would throw a concert and raise $5,000 for saving the trees in the neighborhood.
That's great.
Anyway, well, I'm going to sign off here. Let you get back to your life.
Okay, tell Stephen.
I see Stephen in the distance.
Thank you. Okay, thanks a million.
I love you, Cheryl.
Let me know when it's going to air. Yeah, that was great.
And listen,
really
when I heard that Saul Rubinek was coming to Ashland,
that's terrific.
I'm reviving a very short presentation on my argument that Gaspar Ribeiro is the exact model for Shylock. And
I agree.
And
absolutely.
that they met at Santa Maria Formosa. They could not have avoided each other, and that he would learn of the eventual downfall of Ribeiro and his family and all this.
That'll be great. Can't wait.
So when Saul signed up, I said, "Oh no, I'm going to give a half hour on why Brian Pullen's research in the Venetian archives of their Inquisition turned out to be a real story that Shakespeare was very, very close to." So anyway, Cheryl, love you.
Great.
Talk to you next time.
You too. Take care, Earl.
All right.
Thanks
bye-bye.
again. Bye-bye now.
Well, there you have it, Quiller Nation. Our deepest gratitude to our special guest host and friend of the program, Dr. Earl Showerman, as well as returning guest Cheryl Eagan-Donovan. Thank you both for being here for this great episode. And thank you to all of you for your continued support and prayers. It means a tremendous amount to me. Without further ado, let's turn it over to producer Jake to announce the May Quiller of the Month.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I speak for everybody when I say we all hope that you are doing as well as can be. And thank you so much to Earl for stepping in for today's episode. Everybody in the Quiller Nation greatly appreciate you, Earl. So thank you so much for that. All right, enough of the schmoozy touchy-feely stuff. It's time to pick a Quiller of the Month for the month of May 2026. If you're not sure what this is, well, head on over to patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger and find out. Each and every month, all eligible Quillers are entered into a chance to win an item they're choosing from the shop, as well as, your name in the record books for all of time and space, never to be confused or given improper credit hundreds and hundreds of years down the line. Okay, anyways, all of the eligible Quillers are in the Wheel of Names. It is a spinning. And the Quiller of the Month for May 2026. Okay, this is an interesting one. They're listed as name withheld upon request. Name withheld upon request. Congratulations. I actually recognize the email address connected to this patron, but I don't know if they specifically are opting to be anonymous. Maybe they haven't decided on what their pseudonym is yet. Name upon withheld request. You know who you are out there. I will send you an email to the email on file. Thank you for your continued support. Thanks to everybody, all of the patrons who continue to support the show. We greatly appreciate you. Would not, could not, should not do this program without each and every one of you and the help that you provide to us. That'll do it. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jake. And thank you again to all of you, Quiller Nation. The work that you continue to support and do is momentous, and it does make a difference. Thank you again, and keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
Dragon Wagon.